Today we're going to talk about the executive branch. That's the president. The president has many roles that they have on a daily basis. They balance this or juggle this on any day, any given week, any given day. Um, so we'll go through a few of these here for you real quick, just so you know what they are. Chief of State. This is a ceremonial role. This might be where they're having maybe a dinner for another dignitary, maybe the premier or of prime minister of Great Britain or prime minister of Germany is over. They're gonna have a state dinner. That's ceremonial role. Chief executive. This is helps enforce laws. Chief administrator. He's a director of the federal government, which is over 1 million workers. You know, all the postal workers in the United States would fall under this as well. Chief diplomat. He is the architect of our foreign policy. You know how to deal with other nations and other when they have issues and how we deal with them. Chief legislator. Okay, this is the lawmaking. So he actually helps come up with laws that he tries to get passed. Commander in chief, probably one of the most famous ones. This is where he is in charge of the military. Chief of party. He heads the political party. So, for example, President Trump is a Republican, so he's the head and face of the Republican Party. Chief citizen, he's just representative of all the people. And then sometimes now even he plays chief economist, where this is going to be a little bit more of trying to deal with the economy, even though they don't deal with the economy very much. So those are the roles that the president has on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Again, formal qualifications to be president: natural born U.S. citizen, live in the country for 14 years, and must be at least 35 years old. Again, the part that a lot of people get wrong on this is the natural born citizen. Again, it's not a citizen for so many years. You have to be natural born U.S. citizen. That means you have to be either born in the United States, born on a U.S. ship, a U.S. embassy, one of your parents is a U.S. citizen. Those are natural born citizens. Term and pay. A 4-year term is what they're elected for. So obviously, President Trump was elected to a 4-year term, and now President-elect Biden will be elected to a 4-year term. The 22nd Amendment says that you're only limited to 2 full terms. Again, if you remember in the amendment in the Constitution, we talked about 222. 22nd Amendment limits you to 2 full terms. That's 8 years, but you can serve a 10-year maximum. And how you do that is, for example, if your vice president and your president passes away in the first year of his first term, you take over for those 3 years. That is technically one of your terms. But if you take over, say in year 3, so you have 1 year left, then you can do another 2 terms. That'd be 9 years. So you get a max in there. The pay for the president is not much. $400,000 annually is what the president gets paid. He also gets $50,000 in expenses. The $400,000 is actually up from several years ago. It was only $250,000, I think about 10 years ago. So that is up. They want to set this limit at very low because they don't want this to be a position that people want to do because of the money. They want to do it because it's a service to the country. President Trump actually, one of his promises when he was campaigning 4 years ago was that he would not take a salary, and he has held true to that. And in the last 4 years, he donates his salary to one of the a budget of something else within the government. Other things that they have, other I guess perks. Obviously, the White House. Camp David is a vacation home. He has unlimited amount of cars. He has air travel, the Air Force One. He's got a presidential yacht. He's got a gym that he can go to. He's got better medical, better dental. So these are all perks that they have. They have a pension, again, where when he retires, when he's done, he's continually paid. Secret Service, obviously, protection all the time. Same thing. Presidential succession, if the president dies, resigns, or is removed from office, that's impeached. The vice president succeeds that. Next in line after that is the Speaker of the House, then the President pro tempore of the Senate, the Secretary of State, and then after that the other 13 cabinet members in order. from there, and that's in order of precedence, and that's on page 205 of your book. I probably can't see it on the video there. Okay, so we have this presidential succession. We have this in place in case the president does die. Our government does not die with it. Our government can continue on, and we have that in place without a doubt. A couple videos I'll show, I'll tag in there as well that kind of looks at that and talks about them a little bit. Presidential disability. If the president is disabled, the vice president may assume duties. The president then can resume his duties by informing Congress. The cabinet and vice president can challenge his authority to be disabled. For example, this comes in the 25th Amendment, so maybe you've heard the 25th Amendment with President Trump lately. But this, for example, Ronald Reagan, I'll give him as an example. He was shot in 1981, and he had to go under anesthesia. So therefore, he was not able to do his duties of being president. So he had to sign something over to George Bush so he could become president while he was enabled and under anesthesia there during surgery. And then all of a sudden he can resume his duties by informing Congress. He's able to do so. And then the duties go really right back to him. So we have these parameters here for our president if he is going to be disabled, if he dies. Our government continues to keep on moving, and there is no question on who that is or who's in charge. Vice presidency, there's only two constitutional duties the vice president has. One, to preside over the Senate, and two, decide the question of presidential disability. I'll give you an example here real quick of the vice presidency is really kind of looked at a position that is very weak, I guess. And I'll give you an example. Back in the early 1900s or late 1800s, Theodore Roosevelt was gaining power in the Republican Party, and a lot of people didn't like him. He was very brash, and he was then become governor of New York, and he was getting really, really popular, and they were afraid he was actually going to run for president. So what they do is they decided to nominate him as part of the presidential ticket, and he became vice president at that time. The good thing was is they did his job, or they did their job by putting him in a position where he was, not going to have much power being the vice president, but they also didn't realize that he was going to assume to the presidency when William McKinley died, and then all of a sudden Teddy Roosevelt he goes from the most unlikely or least powerful man in the world as vice president to become the most powerful man in the world when he became president of the United States. So again, importance of office, ready to assume presidency. Okay, if the vice president position's vacated, here's how this works. This has happened before. It happened with Richard Nixon. So Richard Nixon's vice president was a guy by the name of Spiro Agnew. Spiro resigned while in office. So President Nixon nominated another person. That person was Gerald Ford. That person then must be confirmed by majority vote of both houses. So he has to go through the process and be confirmed by a majority vote in the House and the Senate. Gerald Ford was confirmed, so therefore Gerald Ford then became our vice president under Richard Nixon. Well, then Richard Nixon resigned under the Watergate scandal. So Gerald Ford became president of the United States, and then one of his first duties was he pardoned Richard Nixon for any crimes. Big thing here is Gerald Ford is the only person to hold the presidency and not be elected to be the vice president or vice president. I'll watch this video of presidential power here. I will share this with you as well. But I want to look at some of these powers that the president has, what they can and can't do. The executive powers says that they execute and enforce laws. They can appoint and remove people. 2/3 of Congress approval for appointments. So again, we just saw with Amy Coney Barrett with the, I'll get to that in, I guess, a little bit. Might be an appointment of maybe a clerk of some sort. Military power, commander-in-chief. Got the War Powers Act. Only Congress can declare war. Okay, the president cannot declare war. Only Congress can. But they give him the War Powers Act and other resolutions where he could still move troops around and send troops in harm's way without a declaration of war. Judicial powers, he has reprieves and pardons. Again, reprieves and pardons, these are going to be, a pardon is where you are off the hook for a crime. Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford, therefore they forgave him with his crime. A reprieve is to postpone a sentence, so we might postpone somebody's sentence there. They can appoint judges, as we saw with Amy Coney Barrett. President Trump appointed her to be on the Supreme Court, but it takes 2/3 of the Senate approval to do so. Amnesty, then, this is a blanket pardon of a group of people. Okay. Bill Clinton got in a little bit of trouble when he pardoned his brother-in-law for tax evasion when he was leaving office. And you'll see at President Trump that once he leaves office here or gets close to leave office in January, that he will probably pardon a bunch of people. That's usually what happens is they go through the pardons every year and they pardon so many different people. The president's diplomatic powers, they can recognize foreign governments, make treaties, meet with heads of states. Okay. If they do make a treaty, it needs 2/3 of the Senate's approval. Legislative powers, he can veto, obviously, any law that comes up. He can also initiate legislation. So if he wants to come up with a new law, like President Obama come up with the Affordable Health Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, he initiates that legislation, gets it passed. Again, the limit on the power of the veto is that the Congress can override the presidential veto with a 2/3 vote. And then inherent powers. These are not powers expressly given to him, but these are informal powers. And the limits on these informal powers, a lot now is media, the public, and the Supreme Court. They can all kind of informally check the president, telling him he's wrong in these situations, or why'd you do this? Ask him questions. Okay? So these are some presidential powers I wanted you to be aware of as well. And that would be it.